In the summer of 1990, a 4-year-old girl named Lily Cooper walked out of her family's home in Millbrook, Pennsylvania, and never came back. She didn't vanish in the night. There was no broken window, no sign of struggle, no scream that woke the neighbors. She left in broad daylight, buckled into a car seat, waving goodbye through the back window at her mother standing in the driveway. And that wave, that tiny hand pressed against the glass, would be the last thing her family saw of her for 31 years. Millbrook was the kind of town that made you feel safe. 5,000 people, rolling Pennsylvania hills, summer evenings that smelled like fresh-cut grass and charcoal smoke drifting between backyards. Kids rode bikes without helmets. Nobody locked their doors. It was the kind of place where you knew your neighbors, really knew them, and that familiarity felt like protection. The Coopers lived in a white 2-story house on Elm Street. David worked the early shift at the steel mill, up before sunrise most mornings. Patricia worked part-time at the library, shelving books and helping children find stories they'd love. They had 4 kids, Michael at 12, Sarah at 10, Jennifer at 8, and then there was Lily, the youngest. 4 years old, with blonde curls and bright green eyes that caught people off guard with how vivid they were. She was a quiet child, the kind who preferred coloring at the kitchen table to running wild outside. She carried a worn pink stuffed rabbit everywhere she went, a handmade thing from her grandmother that she refused to put down for anything. The Cooper family was, by every measure, ordinary. And that ordinariness was exactly what made what happened to them so devastating. The Hayes family had been in the Coopers' lives for about 3 years. Frank worked alongside David at the mill, same shift, same department. His wife Carol volunteered at the library with Patricia, helping run the summer reading program. They lived 2 streets over in a brick ranch house with a tidy lawn, and they came to every block party, waved every morning, showed up exactly the way good neighbors do. They didn't have children of their own, but nobody thought much of that. Carol had a warmth with kids that filled the gap naturally. She remembered every child's favorite book by name, brought homemade cookies to library events, sat on the grass at neighborhood barbecues playing games with the little ones. Patricia had let her babysit Lily before, more than once, and nothing had ever gone wrong. There was no reason to be suspicious, not a single reason in the world. That's the part that would haunt Patricia Cooper for the rest of her life. It was a Thursday afternoon in mid-July when Carol Hayes knocked on the Cooper's screen door, carrying a plate of chocolate chip cookies, still warm from the oven. Patricia let her in, poured iced tea, and the 2 women settled at the kitchen table while Lily colored quietly on the floor nearby, completely unaware that the conversation happening above her head would change everything. Carol mentioned the trip casually, the way you'd bring up weekend plans with a friend. She and Frank were driving down to Ocean City for a few days, just a little escape from the July heat. And then, almost as an afterthought, she turned to Patricia with a warm smile and asked if Lily might like to come along. Patricia hesitated. Lily was only 4. The idea of her being away for a whole weekend, sleeping somewhere unfamiliar, without her mother, it gave her pause. But Carol had an answer for every concern, delivered gently, without pressure. Just 2 nights, sand and ice cream, and it would give Patricia and David a rare weekend alone, something they hadn't had in over a year. "Let me talk to David," Patricia said finally. Not yes, not no. That evening, standing at the kitchen sink washing dishes, Patricia brought it up. David listened, thought it over. Carol was good with Lily. Frank was solid, dependable. Ocean City was only a couple of hours away. "I don't see why not," he said. Patricia agreed. She told herself the unease in her stomach was just a mother being overprotective. She pushed it down, picked up the phone the next morning, and called Carol to say yes. She would spend the next 31 years wishing she hadn't. Friday morning came. Patricia dressed Lily in pink shorts and a white t-shirt, packed a small bag, extra clothes, her toothbrush, and the pink rabbit. Frank and Carol pulled up right on time in their blue sedan, smiling and waving. Carol got out, buckled Lily carefully into the back seat, promised to call when they arrived, promised to be back Sunday evening by dinner. "Don't worry about a thing," she said through the open window. Patricia stood in the driveway and watched the car roll down Elm Street. Lily waved from the back window, that small hand pressed against the glass, that wide smile, until the car turned the corner and disappeared. Patricia went inside. She made herself a cup of coffee. She told herself everything was fine. By Sunday night, the phone still hadn't rung. Sunday evening came and went like a held breath that never got released. By 6 o'clock, Patricia was checking the window. By 7, she was pacing. By 8, David was on the phone with Frank's brother across town, asking if he'd heard anything. The brother hadn't spoken to Frank in over a week. By 9 o'clock, Patricia's hands were shaking and the knot in her stomach, the one she'd talked herself out of on Friday morning, had become something she couldn't ignore anymore. "Something's wrong," she told David, her voice cracking under the weight of it. "They should have been back hours ago. Carol promised to call. Something has happened. I can feel it." David called the police. Officer Tom Bradley arrived within 30 minutes, stepped inside, and listened as Patricia walked him through everything. Carol's visit on Thursday, the cookies still warm, the iced tea, the beach trip invitation, Friday morning's goodbye, the missing phone call, the silence that had stretched now into 2 full days without a single word. Bradley wrote it all down, asked for descriptions of the Hayes couple, their car, the license plate. Patricia realized with a sinking feeling that she'd never thought to write down the plate number. Why would she have? These were her neighbors. These were people she trusted. Bradley told them he'd check the Hayes house first. Maybe they'd come back tired from the drive and simply forgotten to call. It happened sometimes. But when officers arrived at the Brick Ranch house on Maple Street, the driveway was empty. The windows were dark. They knocked, rang the bell, walked around back. Nothing. A neighbor said she hadn't seen Frank or Carol since Thursday evening, the night before they'd supposedly left for the beach. By midnight, Millbrook police had filed an official missing child report for Lily Marie Cooper. Detective James Crawford was called in just after 1 in the morning. 20 years on the force, the kind of cop who'd seen enough to be hard to rattle. He sat across from Patricia and David in their living room, Patricia on the couch barely holding herself together, David pacing because standing still was impossible, and he asked them everything. How long had they known the Hayes? Where did they work? Had they ever mentioned family in other states? Had anything seemed off lately? The answers painted a picture of an ordinary couple. Friendly, quiet, no red flags. Nothing that should have set off alarms in anyone who knew them. Crawford organized search teams before sunrise. He sent officers to Ocean City to canvass hotels and motels. He contacted the Maryland State Police, alerted every department between Millbrook and the Atlantic coast. By dawn Monday morning, the story had spread through town like fire through dry grass. Neighbors gathered on the Cooper lawn bringing food, offering to help. The local paper ran Lily's photo on the front page. 4 years old. Blonde curls. Bright green eyes. Last seen Friday morning, waving goodbye. The first 48 hours of a missing child case are the most critical. Everyone in law enforcement knows it. Crawford knew it. And those hours were already gone. What Crawford found next changed the entire shape of the investigation. When he pulled Frank Hayes' employment records from the steel mill, the file showed that Frank had quit his job on Wednesday, the day before Carol knocked on the Cooper's door with warm cookies and a beach trip invitation. He'd told his supervisor he was relocating to Florida for a better opportunity. No 2 weeks' notice. Just gone. Carol had resigned from her library volunteer position 2 weeks earlier, citing personal matters that needed her attention at home. Neither of them had mentioned any of this to the Coopers. Not a word. When the landlord unlocked the Hayes house and let investigators inside, what they found wasn't a home someone had left for a weekend trip. Every room was stripped bare. Furniture gone. Closets empty. Kitchen cabinets cleaned out. Even the trash cans had been emptied and wiped down. It looked less like a residence and more like a stage set that had been quietly dismantled over weeks, piece by piece, without anyone noticing. They hadn't gone to Ocean City. They had never intended to. In the basement, buried under a small pile of discarded mail, Crawford found one envelope that stopped him cold. A letter from a P.O. box in Portland, Oregon. No name on the return address, just the box number. Inside, a single handwritten note, the script neat and feminine. Everything is ready. Come when you can. We're waiting. No signature. Crawford bagged it carefully, but he already understood what it meant. This wasn't impulsive. This wasn't a couple who'd snapped under pressure and made a desperate decision on a Thursday afternoon over iced tea. The empty house, the resigned positions, the prepared escape route, the letter from Oregon. This had been planned for months. Maybe longer. They had walked into the Coopers' lives, earned their trust slowly and deliberately, and then executed a disappearance so clean it left almost nothing behind. They had taken Lily Cooper the way someone takes something they've been quietly deciding to take for a very long time. The Portland P.O. box led nowhere. Police obtained a warrant, but when officers checked it, the box was empty. It had been rented 6 months earlier under a false name, paid in cash, with no contact information attached. The post office security footage didn't go back far enough to show who'd been collecting mail from it. Crawford requested records from every city the Hayes had previously lived. What came back was a pattern that made his stomach turn. For different states over the past decade. Never staying longer than 2 or 3 years in any one place. Frank cycling through factory and warehouse jobs. Carol working as a nanny in 2 separate cities. Both families reporting no issues. No concerns, nothing alarming. Just a warm, reliable woman who was wonderful with children. And then, buried in an Ohio case file from several years earlier, a missing child report. A 4-year-old girl, blonde, taken by a couple the family had trusted, who'd offered to take her on a short trip out of state. The case had gone cold. The child was never found. The family had eventually moved away, broken in ways that don't heal. Crawford read it twice, then picked up the phone and called the FBI. FBI agent Rebecca Martinez arrived in Millbrook within 48 hours. She was a specialist in missing and exploited children. The kind of investigator who'd spent her career inside cases most people couldn't bear to think about for more than a few minutes. She reviewed everything Crawford had assembled, read through it methodically, and when she looked up, her expression carried the particular weight of someone recognizing something they'd seen before. "This fits a pattern," she told Crawford, her voice low and deliberate. "Couples who've lost a child, or who can't have one. Sometimes the grief hollows them out in ways that push them somewhere dangerous. They don't want to hurt a child. They want to keep one. So they find a family. They integrate themselves carefully, build trust over months, sometimes years. And then they take a child under the cover of something innocent. A playdate, a day trip, a weekend at the beach." Crawford felt his jaw tighten. "So they're keeping her, raising her as their own." Martinez nodded slowly. "If their intention was to harm her, we'd likely have found something by now. No body, no ransom demand, no contact of any kind. That tells us they wanted a child to raise, and they chose Lily because she fit exactly what they were looking for." It was the first time since Sunday night that the investigation had produced anything that felt like hope. Lily might be alive, but that hope came wrapped in a reality that was difficult to sit with. She was alive somewhere, in the hands of people who had stolen her, being raised as someone else entirely. The search expanded to national scale. FBI agents combed adoption records, hospital birth registrations, and school enrollment databases across the country, looking for any child entered into the system under Hayes or any variation of the name. Border Patrol was contacted. No record of the Hayes crossing into Canada or Mexico through any official checkpoint. They had stayed inside the country, which narrowed the geography but still left an enormous amount of ground to cover across 50 states. Back in Millbrook, the Cooper family tried to find a way to keep living inside a grief that had no bottom to it. Patricia stopped going to the library. She couldn't stand among the children's books, couldn't help small hands find stories. Not when her own daughter was somewhere she couldn't reach. David kept showing up to the mill because the routine held him together and the paycheck kept the family afloat. But his coworkers said he'd gone somewhere unreachable behind his eyes. Michael, Sarah, and Jennifer came home from their cousin's house Monday morning confused and frightened. And the question Jennifer kept asking, "When is she coming home, Mommy?" was the one nobody could answer. The first year passed without a single solid lead breaking through. Crawford never closed the file. He'd drive past the empty Hayes house sometimes on his way home from a late shift, staring at the dark windows like they might eventually give something up. On Lily's 5th birthday, Patricia baked a cake. She put 5 candles on top and lit them and let them burn all the way down while the family sat around the table in silence so heavy it had its own texture. "She's out there," Patricia said, barely above a whisper. "I know she is. I can feel it. She's alive and someday she's coming home." David took her hand and held it, because there was nothing else to do. Years moved the way time does inside unresolved grief. Slowly and then all at once. Each passing season making the case file thicker with dead ends and the Hayes more thoroughly invisible. A decade after Lily disappeared, there was still nothing. No credit card activity traced to Frank or Carol Hayes. No tax returns filed under their names. No driver's license renewals. No utility accounts. No digital footprints of any kind in any database federal investigators could access. They had shed their identities so completely it was as if Frank and Carol Hayes had never existed at all. 2 people who had walked through Millbrook for 3 years, smiled at barbecues, brought cookies to the library, and then simply ceased to be. The Cooper children grew up carrying Lily's absence the way you carry something heavy enough to reshape you over time. Michael joined the army after high school, drawn toward structure and purpose, toward protecting people in ways he hadn't been able to protect his little sister. Sarah became a social worker in Philadelphia, spending her career fighting for children in broken systems, finding in that work some way to make meaning out of what had happened to her family. Jennifer studied criminal justice, became a detective in Pittsburgh, driven, her colleagues noticed, with a particular intensity whenever a missing child case crossed her desk. Patricia kept a candle burning in the front window every single night. Neighbors had a name for it. They called it Lily's Light. It became part of the town's quiet mythology, that small, steady flame that refused to go out regardless of how many years passed without news. When Lily would have turned 21, Patricia organized a vigil in the town square. Dozens of people came, holding candles in the July heat, sharing memories of a little girl most of them had only known briefly before she was gone. The local news ran an updated age progression photo alongside the story, showing what Lily might look like now as a young woman. Long blonde hair, green eyes, still vivid, a face assembled from science and probability, a best guess at a person who'd been growing up somewhere in the dark, out of reach. Patricia stared at that photo for a long time after the vigil, tracing the features with her eyes. "I wonder if she remembers us," she said to David that night, lying in bed in the dark. "I wonder if she knows there's a family here who never stopped looking." David didn't answer. He just pulled her closer, and they lay there together in the silence that had become the permanent background of their lives. By 2021, 31 years had passed. The case file sat in storage at the Millbrook Police Department, thick and heavy with the accumulated weight of every lead that had gone nowhere. Crawford had long since retired, but he'd left meticulous notes for whoever came after him. Every detail preserved in case the moment ever came when something new surfaced from somewhere unexpected. Nobody in Millbrook was holding their breath anymore. Not really. The hope had become something quieter than hope. More like a refusal to fully let go, sustained by nothing more than love and the absolute unwillingness to close a door that might still, against every odd, open again. Then, on an ordinary morning in May 2021, in a passport office in Portland, Oregon, a 35-year-old woman named Jessica Martin sat down across a clerk's desk and asked for her first passport. And everything changed. Jessica Martin was, by every outward measure, unremarkable in the best possible way. 35 years old, graphic designer, quiet life in Portland. She paid her bills on time, had a small circle of friends, enjoyed her work. She'd been raised by parents she knew as Frank and Carol Martin, homeschooled, kept fairly isolated from other kids, moving between small towns throughout her childhood before eventually settling outside Portland. Her parents had explained away the lack of official documentation the way they explained everything, with a distrust of institutions, of hospitals, of government systems that wanted to catalog and control people. She'd been born at home, they told her. Records weren't something they believed in keeping. Jessica had accepted this. She loved her parents. They'd been warm, attentive, devoted in ways that had made her feel genuinely cared for throughout her childhood. If they were overprotective, she chalked it up to personality. Some parents were just like that. But now she needed a passport for a work trip to Canada, and a passport required a birth certificate. And that's where the story her parents had built around her entire life began, quietly and irrevocably, to come apart. The clerk that morning was a woman named Linda Stevens, thorough, experienced, trained to notice things that didn't line up. She typed Jessica's information into the system and searched for her birth record. Nothing came back. She tried different spellings, different counties, different date variations. Still nothing. No record of a Jessica Martin being born anywhere in the state of Oregon, in any year, under any combination of the details provided. "I'm sorry," Linda said carefully, looking up at Jessica. "I can't find your birth certificate in our system. Do you have a physical copy you could bring in?" Jessica shook her head slowly. She'd never seen it. Her parents had always handled that. Linda kept her expression neutral, but behind it, something had shifted. Missing birth record. Homeschooled upbringing. Parents who controlled all documentation. She recognized the pattern from her training. Identity fraud, sometimes. Or something worse. "Can you give me a few minutes?" Linda said gently. "I need to check something with my supervisor." She walked to the back office, pulled up the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children database, a resource all passport clerks had access to precisely for moments like this one, and entered what she knew. Approximate age. Physical description. No traceable birth record. Isolated upbringing with controlling parents. The system returned several possible matches. One of them stopped Linda cold. Lily Marie Cooper. Missing from Millbrook, Pennsylvania since July 1990. Would be 35 years old. Blonde hair. Green eyes. Linda printed the file, steadied herself, and walked back out to the waiting area where Jessica was sitting with her hands folded in her lap, looking confused and increasingly uneasy about the delay stretching out before her. Linda sat down beside her. Chose her next words the way you'd choose your footing crossing uncertain ground. "Miss Martin, have your parents ever mentioned anything about you being adopted, or coming from another family?" Jessica's face drained of color. Her hands gripped the armrests. "No," she whispered. "Why? What did you find?" Linda showed her the file. The photograph of 4-year-old Lily beside the age progression image, the computer-generated face of the woman she might have become. Jessica stared at it, her breath catching somewhere in her chest and staying there. The resemblance wasn't subtle. It wasn't something you could talk yourself out of or explain away with coincidence. It was her own face looking back at her from a missing child report filed 31 years ago in a Pennsylvania town she'd never heard of. The room felt like it was tilting. "This can't be right," she said, her voice barely holding together. "My parents wouldn't. They couldn't have. This has to be a mistake." But even as she said it, something was shifting beneath the words. Some deep, wordless thing that had always been there, just below the surface of the life she thought she'd lived. FBI agents arrived at the passport office within the hour. Agent Sarah Chen led the conversation, calm, unhurried, the practiced steadiness of someone who understood that the person sitting across from her had just had the ground pulled out from under her entire existence. She asked Jessica about her childhood, the moves between towns, the homeschooling, the absence of documents. Jessica answered slowly, trying to be accurate, feeling the strange vertigo of describing a life that was suddenly in question. "Do you remember anything from before you were 5 or 6? Chen asked. Jessica closed her eyes, reached back into the earliest, foggiest layers of her memory. "Pieces," she said finally. "Flashes. I remember snow, which always seemed strange because Oregon doesn't get much. I remember a bigger house, with stairs. Other children's voices I could never place. But my parents always said those were just dreams. That my memory was unreliable when I was that small." Chen exchanged a glance with her partner. Those weren't dreams. Those were the last fragments of a life that had been taken from a little girl before she was old enough to hold on to it. A DNA swab was taken. Rush order placed with the FBI lab. And while the sample made its way through the system, agents drove out to the small house at the end of a gravel road outside Portland where Frank and Carol Martin lived surrounded by trees. When Carol answered the door and saw the badges, the color left her face immediately. Her hand found the door frame and held on. She already knew why they were there. Frank had died 2 years earlier. A heart attack. Quick. Carol was in her 70s now, moving slower, the decades visible in her face. She stepped back from the door and let them in without argument, and for the next 3 hours, sitting at the kitchen table in the house where she'd raised a stolen child, she told them everything. She and Frank had lost their only biological daughter to cancer when the girl was 3 years old. The grief had been total, annihilating, the kind that doesn't leave room for anything else to grow. They'd moved to Millbrook trying to outrun it, and that's where they'd found the Coopers. A full, happy family, 4 children, and Lily, the youngest, with her blonde curls and green eyes, had become a fixation for Carol in ways she couldn't fully explain even now, sitting across from federal agents with her hands folded on the table. "We planned it for a few months," Carol said, crying steadily as she spoke. "Frank quit the mill. I stopped volunteering. We arranged everything in Oregon ahead of time, found a place to land. When we took her, we drove straight through. Didn't stop except for gas. Changed our names as soon as we crossed into Oregon and never used the old ones again." Chen listened without interrupting. When Carol finished, Chen looked at her evenly. "You let that family suffer for 31 years, she said, not knowing if their daughter was alive or dead. That's not a mistake. That's a choice you made every single day." Carol had no answer for that. She just kept crying, and the silence that followed her tears said more than any defense could have. The DNA results came back within a week. Jessica Martin was Lily Marie Cooper. The call went to the Cooper family shortly after, a request to come to Philadelphia for a meeting. No details given over the phone, just that it was important and that they should come together. Patricia and David made the drive with Jennifer, hearts suspended somewhere between hope and the terror of hoping too much after so many years of being wrong to hope at all. When Agent Chen sat them down and told them what had been found, Patricia's legs gave out beneath her. She collapsed into the chair, sobbing in a way that had no pretense left in it. 31 years of compressed grief and desperate, stubborn love releasing all at once. "She's alive," Patricia kept saying, over and over, like a woman who'd forgotten how to stop saying the one thing she'd been waiting decades to believe. "Our baby is alive." Chen slid recent photos of Jessica across the table. Patricia picked one up with trembling hands and stared at it, green eyes looking back at her, bright as they'd always been, unchanged by time in the one way that mattered most. "She has her grandmother's eyes," Patricia whispered. "She always did." The reunion was arranged carefully, with counselors and FBI agents present, not as a formality, but because everyone involved understood that what was about to happen in that room had no real precedent to follow. There was no script for this. No set of instructions for how a stolen child and the family she'd been taken from were supposed to find each other again across 31 years of separate lives. Jessica flew to Philadelphia alone. She'd spoken to Carol after the confession, a phone call that had lasted nearly 2 hours. Carol apologizing in circles while Jessica sat on the other end of the line trying to hold together a self that felt like it was coming apart at the seams. She hadn't been able to give Carol what Carol was asking for. She wasn't ready. Maybe she wouldn't be for a long time. But she'd listened, and she'd hung up, and then she'd booked her flight east toward a family she didn't remember but apparently had always had. She stood outside the conference room door with Agent Chen beside her, knowing that on the other side of it were 3 people who had spent more than 3 decades keeping a candle burning for her. The thought was almost too large to hold in her chest without breaking. "Take your time," Chen said quietly, and opened the door. Jessica stepped inside. Patricia moved first, crossing the room slowly, like she was afraid that moving too fast might shatter something fragile and irreplaceable. She stopped just in front of Jessica and looked at her face the way you look at something you've been trying to picture for so long that seeing the real thing feels simultaneously familiar and impossible. "Lily," she whispered. That single word, her name, her real name, spoken by the woman who had given it to her, did something to Jessica that no amount of DNA evidence or case files or age progression photos had managed to do. It reached past 31 years of constructed identity and touched something at the very bottom of her that had apparently been waiting, without knowing it was waiting, to be found. "I don't remember you," Jessica said honestly, tears already falling. "But I think I remember your voice. Somewhere deep down where I can't quite reach." Patricia reached out and touched her daughter's face with both hands, gently, the way you'd confirm something real after years of reaching for something that wasn't there. Then she pulled her close, and Jessica let herself be held. And the sound that came from Patricia in that moment was the sound of a grief finally, after everything, getting to end. David wrapped his arms around both of them without a word. Jennifer stepped forward when Jessica reached a hand toward her, and the 4 of them stood there together in the middle of a government conference room, holding each other with the particular desperation of people who understood exactly what had almost been lost forever. Over the weeks that followed, Jessica learned the shape of the life that had been taken from her. She met Michael and Sarah over video calls, watched their faces crumple and reform into joy at the sight of her. She sat with Patricia going through photo albums, herself as a baby, a toddler, a small girl with a stuffed rabbit and a smile that apparently hadn't changed much in 3 decades. She learned about the search, the vigils, the age progression photos, the cold case files stacked in storage, the candle in the window that had burned every single night without exception for 31 years. That detail undid her more than almost anything else. "Every night?" Jessica asked, and Patricia nodded like it had never once been a question worth considering. "Of course, every night. What else would you do?" The legal proceedings against Carol moved forward with a particular awkwardness of justice applied to a crime 3 decades old. She was charged with kidnapping and interstate child abduction. Frank, dead 2 years, would face nothing. The prosecution, weighing Carol's age, her declining health, and the logistical complications of a trial built on evidence from 1990, agreed to a plea deal. 5 years, likely less with good behavior. For 31 years of destruction inflicted on a family that had trusted her completely, it was a sentence that satisfied almost no one. But Jessica, sitting with a counselor working through the impossible emotional math of all of it, said something that stayed with everyone who heard it. "I don't know if I'll ever fully forgive her," she said quietly. "But I also can't spend the rest of my life carrying this. She gave me a childhood, even if it was built on something stolen. I have to find a way to live with both truths at once. I don't have another choice." Jessica kept her name, not because she'd forgotten who Lily Cooper was, but because she'd spent 35 years becoming Jessica Martin, and that person was real, regardless of the lie underneath her. She added Lily Marie back legally, reclaiming it on paper, wearing both names the way you wear 2 parts of a self that took a long time to reconcile. She was Jessica to her friends in Portland, to her colleagues, to the life she'd built on the West Coast. She was Lily to her mother, who said the name every time like it was still something she needed to confirm out loud was real. Patricia never corrected anyone who called her daughter by either name. "You're my Lily," she told her one afternoon, sitting together in the Cooper living room surrounded by the ordinary evidence of a family's life. "But you're also Jessica, and I love both parts of you completely. I'm just grateful I get to love any part of you at all." On a warm evening in August 2022, 1 year after the passport office, 1 year after Linda Stevens had looked at a missing birth record and trusted her training, the Cooper family gathered at the white 2-story house on Elm Street for dinner. Jessica had flown in from Portland. Michael came down from North Carolina with his family. Sarah drove up from Philadelphia. Jennifer was there, the detective who'd spent her entire career partly in service of the hope that her sister might someday come back. The table was full in a way it hadn't been in 31 years. Children who hadn't existed the last time this family was whole were now running through the same house where Lily had once colored pictures on the kitchen floor. Laughter moved through the rooms like it was relearning the architecture. After dinner, Patricia took Jessica upstairs. The bedroom had been kept exactly as it was the morning Lily left for the beach in July 1990. Stuffed animals arranged on the bed. Small dresses still hanging in the closet. And on the pillow, worn and faded by 3 decades of remaining in the same place, the pink rabbit. The one her grandmother had made. The one Lily had been too excited about the beach trip to remember to take with her that Friday morning. Patricia picked it up and held it out. Jessica took it, held it against her chest. And something moved across her face that was neither memory nor its absence, but something older than both. Something that lived below the reach of conscious thought. In the place where the earliest impressions of a life get stored before language exists to name them. "I remember this," she said softly. The certainty in her voice surprised even her. "I used to carry it everywhere. I wouldn't put it down for anything." Patricia smiled through tears that had long since stopped needing explanation. Later that night, after the dishes were done and the children were asleep in borrowed beds, Jessica and Patricia sat together on the front porch in the warm August dark. The swing creaked gently between them. The street was quiet the way Millbrook had always been quiet. That particular small-town stillness that had once felt like safety and had then, for a long time, felt like the place where safety had failed. In the front window behind them, the candle was still burning. "Thank you," Jessica said, into the darkness. "For not giving up. For keeping that light on when there was no reason left to think it would ever matter." Patricia took her daughter's hand and held it the way she'd been waiting 31 years to hold it again. "A mother doesn't stop looking," she said simply. "The love doesn't die and the hope doesn't disappear. It just learns to wait. However long it takes." The candle burned on in the window behind them. The same flame that had kept its vigil through 3 decades of silence and grief and stubborn, unconditional refusal to accept that gone meant gone forever. It had been right all along.